Hi everyone! In today's video I'm going to be showing you how I created this beautiful sparkly shimmery geode effect in the background of this illustration. Now the book that I'm working from is called Enigma and it's by Lenka Filinenko, who I've reviewed a book for before. This is her latest book and it's a really stunning book. You can see by this illustration the kind of quality of work that you'll be getting in the book, but of course I will be reviewing it. What happened was I came and sat down with this book earlier today, knowing that I wanted to colour a page for my review, as I usually do. And I came across this page and I knew that with all the crystals and the geode behind it, if I could get it right, it would look absolutely fantastic and galactical and, you know, really shimmery and bright. And I think I've achieved that. So what I did was I jumped straight on here as soon as I finished this strip to come and do a tutorial for you all, because I knew that I would get asked as soon as I posted the page. So here it is. Now, very easy to do, as everything usually is. Now, I used some watercolour paints. The ones I'm using are the Pretty Excellent watercolours. I have reviewed those on the channel, but you can use any watercolours you like. It doesn't matter what brand. I'm not affiliated with anybody, so just use whatever it is you want. I also used, to create that shimmery top coat, some KJ Design by Karen paints, which you can see here. This is a selection of the paints I have from Karen, and the ones specifically that I'm using for this are these here. These are called the B-Wing collection, and they're basically a clear paint which has a very sparkly pigment embedded into them, and it's sort of like a clear top coat but with a coloured shine. Very difficult to describe, but if I kind of bring them up to camera and get you focused in, hopefully you'll be able to see that within these five here there are different colours. I don't know whether the camera's picking that up or not, but we've got violet, gold, blue, green and red in those B-Wing colours. So they're translucent and they do have a slight bit of colour tint to them. So that's all I've used. Now you can get the B-Wing paints as their own set on Karen's shop. It will all be linked in the description. This book, this watercolour set, these paints, everything you need in the description. But if you don't have the B-Wing paints, you can use any kind of glitter top coat. I think you could probably even use a glitter top coat of nail varnish even. But anything you've got that's glittery you can use, as long as it is kind of transparent, translucent, and you'll be able to see the colours of the watercolour that you've put down underneath. But I do recommend Karen's paints, one, because they are absolutely amazing quality. They are packed with pigment. I mean, you can just see, looking at this selection here, how stunning they are. Also, KJ Designs is a small business. Karen makes every single paint single-handedly and works so incredibly hard. She's the loveliest person you could ever wish to meet. She's a great friend and her products are fantastic quality, so what more could you ask for? The B-Wings specifically are really good for this project because they do have that tint of colour in them. So instead of just slapping on a coat of, you know, a silver glitter or something like that, you can get a tint of that colour that will go over the top of the colours you put down. So for example, I'll put the blue B-Wing over the blue watercolour, the violet over the violet, etc. So yeah. Right, now I've rambled on long enough, let's get to the actual technique. I'm going to skip a line. Now, if you are using this particular technique and you're doing it all in one go, please either wait for it to dry or skip a line, because if you try and do this line right next to the one you've just done while it's wet, obviously you're going to get some bleed. So what I've done is I've let this dry, but even so I'm going to be colouring the painting the next line in, because I think geodes kind of have like a white line between each thing. I'm not really sure, to be honest, but I'm going to skip it and later on I'll see what to do about that. So first things first, get some water. Now you can see this water is quite dirty. It's the water I've been using already, but I thought that would be quite good to be able to show you on camera where I'm putting the water with it having a bit of a tint to it. Don't know if that's going to work or not, but let me zoom you in. So here we go. Focused in. So I'm going to grab some water on my paintbrush, and hopefully, because it's tinted, you'll be able to see. So I've got quite a lot of water here, and the paper in this book is really thick. It's like a cardstock, so it can definitely handle some wet media. Now, I'm getting quite a bit of water on the brush. I'm not sort of wiping it on the side of the glass or anything like that. I want quite a bit of water on the page. And all I'm doing is I'm putting a big dot of water down, and then I'm dragging it with the paintbrush up to the edges of where the lines are on this particular slice of the geode. So I'm trying to fill all of the space without going over the edges. So this is a wet on wet technique, and when we put the paint down it will sort of spread by itself. So I want to make sure that we've got quite a bit of water down, so just dotting some on and then dragging it with the paintbrush. And I'm going to do the whole stripe because we're using a fair amount of water and it's not going to dry by the time we get to it. So just dotting that water on, dragging it down and just trying to stay within the lines because the paint won't travel anywhere else. So once you've filled the line as best you can, and don't worry if you haven't got right to the edges at this point or what have you, we can always drag it again with the water when we've put the paint on. So there we go, we've filled in that particular line. Now, colours I've used on this one, I'm going to emulate that. So I started off with quite a dark blue, so this one here, I'm not entirely sure which colour it is, should have found that out before I did this, but it's quite a dark blue, and if you are using other paints, then it won't really matter what it's called, just get yourself a dark blue. And then once I've loaded the paintbrush, I'm going to go in and just touch it to the top of the water, and now you'll see straight away that the water just spreads the paint. So that's the wet on wet technique. Now I'm just sort of dotting and being really gentle with it, just to try and manipulate the paint along the water that we've put down, but it will sort of spread by itself, as I say. And this is the point where you can get right up to the edge with it and you can sort of see better that you're filling in the gap. So get yourself, a fairly small paintbrush so that you can get to the edge. And if you go over, it doesn't matter. Like I say, we're not going to be colouring or painting the line next to it just yet anyway. And once you've sort of spread along the colour and it looks fairly even, now it will kind of go a bit bumpy because of the paper buckling slightly. It will do that on pretty much any stock unless it's a proper watercolour card, but don't worry about that. Let it pull where it wants to pull. We can manoeuvre that around later. Once you've done that, we want to get the next colour going. So I've just pulled that through there and you can see it's going where it wants to go. Now the next colour I used was the purple. So get yourself a nice red violet. I'll go for this one here. You can see and realise that everything's off screen because I always do that. Get yourself a nice violet. Again, load your paintbrush with the paint and bring it on, dot it on. It will mix in with the blue. It will travel along the water of its own right, and you can just use your brush to manipulate it to the edges. I'm not going to go right the way down, but what I am going to do is I'm going to just clean my brush off, just dry it slightly. I do the under the armpit swipe to dry it. But you could get some kitchen roll or something, normal. And then just to the point where the purple meets the blue, I'm going to get the blue and I'm just going to dot it around and pull it up to the purple and basically just try and smooth that transition a little bit. That's all I'm doing here, just smoothing the transition a little. And by doing that, it just makes it look a little bit more natural rather than just meeting at a specific edge, if that makes sense. So you don't have to go too far with it. You could bring a little bit of purple up here if you want, again just to make it look nice and natural, that blend. When we've got a nice blend there, we'll just leave that for a second and we'll go into our third colour, which I used a lighter blue, so this one here, just to differentiate it a little bit really. So here we go with the lighter blue, just popping that in at the bottom. It is a very sort of cornflower blue. It's really light and delicate, and I'm just going to bring more of it up here into the purple, just sort of push that back a little bit, which you can do. Really, really love using paints with this technique. And as you pull some of the blue up into the purple, you will see, well, hopefully you can see, yeah, you can see that it is sort of moulding together. Now I do realise that I've got an overhead light here and it might be difficult to see sort of where the paints have gone. If I just keep tilting it for you a little bit, you can see it better. But yeah, so I'm just dragging some of the paint across into the next paint. I'm going to grab a little bit more of that blue and just dab a little bit of it up into the purple, just like that. So it's more of a transition. Again, I don't know whether you can see this properly. It's not great to do videos with a lot of water because the light just doesn't allow you to see what you're doing. But hopefully you can understand what's happening. So I've just turned the overhead light off for a moment and put the big light on so that you can sort of see what is going on with the colours. You can see how they've sort of bled into one another, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to see that better. Now the next thing that I did was I got a little bit of green because I really like how the green looks on the blue. I'm using this green here. It's a really light green. Again, just load up your paintbrush. I know it's really shadowed, but I'm just trying to figure out the best way to be able to show you this. So I grabbed some green on the paintbrush and then just dabbed it while it's still wet, but it's kind of drying now. It's going on to dry, and hopefully you can see the areas that I'm dabbing the green. Now I'm being really, really random with it. And if I just dab, the water will still take it wherever it wants to. So the last thing I want is for it to look constructed. I want it to have a really natural sort of crystallized look to it. So yeah, just dab a little bit of green here and there, and that will just make the blue pop a little bit more. Okay, so I've put the overhead light back on. All I'm going to do now is take some of that really, really light blue that we used at the bottom and just dot it very slightly, just as I did with the green, onto the purple. So we've got a couple of these little areas. Can you see that? A couple of these little areas of blue that are just creeping through the purple. Okay, now that we've got our watercolour base done, we need to put our shiny top coat on there. So whatever you're using, now is the time. It doesn't have to be dry, as you can see. Mine is still a little bit wet, and I prefer it that way. It seems to blend better, but you can of course wait until it's dry if you wish. It won't really make a whole lot of difference. So get your sparkly medium. For me, it is the beautiful B-Wing paints. And as we've started off with blue at the top, I'm going to go for the blue B-Wing. Now I'll bring this up to camera so that you can see straight away just how much beautiful, here we go, beautiful, beautiful sparkly pigment we have on that brush there, and it's all with a blue tone, so it's going to go absolutely fantastically with our blue watercolour. Now all I'm doing is simply spreading it over the top of what we've already put down. Now if you do have those little bits of green dots in there, you can try and avoid them, but to be honest, it'll all add to the effect anyway. You don't have to be too careful with this really. So I'm dabbing it on. Again, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up because of course of the overhead light. Very, very difficult to film things that are wet. So once you have put down your blue or whatever sparkle it is you're using, if you're using a generic kind of silver sparkle, you can just do the whole thing. I'm going to get some purple or violet B-Wing now and continue. So this one down here, just making sure my paintbrush is fairly wet because I do want it to travel and smooth out quite nicely. Pick up some of that creamy pigment and then go over our violet bit. So as I say, I'm hoping that this is picking up what I'm putting down, but I will show you at the end, sort of out of the light, what it looks like. So I'm just keep washing my brush because I don't want to sully the paint in the pan, and just dotting all over the purple bit that we've put down. So that's a really nice coating there of the bee wing. I'm going to grab a little bit more blue just for the bottom bit that we did and cover that as well. Because it's translucent, it will have the tint, but it's not going to change any of the colours that you've put down with the standard watercolours. So that's one really good thing about these as well. We do have a green bee wing, so I'm going to grab a little bit of that and just dot it on those areas of green that we did at the top with the blue. It's kind of warped into each other anyway at this point, so it doesn't really make a huge difference, but we might as well give it as much sparkle as possible, hadn't we? See, this is what I mean by sully the paint. You've got to sort of keep your brush nice and clean when you're going backwards and forwards. So once you've sort of spread all of your sparkly medium absolutely everywhere, all over where we put our watercolour paint, you should be able to see a beautiful sparkle effect going on already. But the thing about sparkly things, wet media, is that they look so much more sparkly when they're dry. And I'll just compare it in a second when I get up to the dry one that I did before this video, and you should be able to see what I mean by that. So again, I'm just finishing up putting a little bit of blue bee wing over the top of the blue bits that we daubed onto the purple. Now let's see if I can show you what I mean. So again, difficult to show you, but hopefully you can see just how much sparklier the dry one looks at the moment. And that's what will happen to this. So you can't really take it as it is at the moment. You've got to let it dry, and you will end up seeing all these lovely areas of sparkle all over the geode. And that is the technique. So I'm really hoping you've enjoyed it. What I'm going to do now is carry on with the rest of the geode in this video as a speed up, and then as soon as it's all dry, I'll come back and we'll have a look at it then. Okay, so it's all dry now. I'll bring it up to camera so that you can see all of the beautiful sparkly shimmer that we've created in the background. and I hope you'll agree it looks really, really effective, especially for colouring things like crystals, geodes, even galaxies. I think that'll work really, really well. Yeah, the one tip I would say is don't put too much paint on. So when you first put the water all over your area, don't then come in with a huge brush full of paint. You want just a little bit of watercolour paint to dab on, and it will sort of spread itself. If you use too thick a paint, it will get really dark like it is over here, and that's just not the effect we're going for. We want something like this, which is a little bit lighter and more blended. Also, if you are using these colours, don't put the green next to the purple. It just makes a really muddy colour. I should have known that, really. But yeah, other than that, I think it's really, really effective. I hope you do too. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do for this geode, if I'm going to do the same thing. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. Do let me know in the comments, and all the links you need will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.